Here's something terrifying that nobody warns you about. The moment you start genuinely winning in life, your brain begins systematically shutting down parts of your empathy. I'm not talking about becoming heartless or cruel. I'm talking about a neurological shift that happens automatically, that makes connection harder, even when you desperately want it. And if you don't understand what's happening, this pattern will destroy every meaningful relationship you have right before you achieve everything you've worked for. Let me explain what's actually going on in your brain when success starts isolating you, because once you see the mechanism, you can prevent the loneliness that takes down so many high achievers. Experience, drift. Your brain builds its entire model of reality from your daily experiences. When you were struggling with the same problems as everyone around you, worrying about rent, dealing with difficult bosses, stressed about money, your brain had instant reference points for what others were going through. Someone mentions they're exhausted from their commute, and your brain immediately fires up mirror neurons that say, I know exactly what that feels like. But here's what happens when you level up. Your daily reality fundamentally changes. You're no longer commuting because you work from home. You're no longer worried about bills because you've built financial cushion. You're solving different problems now, like scaling systems, or managing teams, or optimizing investments. And your brain, being the incredibly efficient machine it is, starts pruning those old neural pathways you're not using anymore. It's not cruelty, it's cognitive efficiency. But the result is you literally cannot relate the way you used to. Someone complains about their toxic workplace, and instead of instant empathy, your brain goes into problem-solving mode. Why don't they just quit? Why don't they start something on the side? You're not trying to be dismissive. Your brain genuinely doesn't have easy access to that feeling of being trapped anymore. Empathy lag. There's actually a delay now between when someone shares their struggle and when you can access genuine emotional resonance with it. In the past, empathy was instant and automatic. Now you have to consciously think your way back to those feelings, and that pause, that tiny delay, reads as coldness to other people. They can feel that you're not immediately with them emotionally. And here's the cruel irony. You often care more than you used to because success has given you resources and perspective to actually help people. But it doesn't feel that way to them because your emotional response isn't instantaneous anymore. This is why successful people often say things that sound tone-deaf without meaning to. They'll suggest solutions that require resources or mindsets that took them years to develop, forgetting that they didn't always think this way. Your advice is technically correct, but emotionally, it lands like you're speaking a foreign language. The reinforcement loop. Every time you succeed, your brain releases dopamine and literally rewires to prioritize the behaviors that led to that success. If you succeeded by working while others partied, by saying no to social events, by focusing intensely on your craft, your brain marked those choices as correct. And it starts automating them. The problem is your brain doesn't distinguish between useful boundaries and emotional withdrawal. It just knows that emotional distance often preceded success, so it starts making that your default. You become less available, less reactive to emotional demands, more protected, because your nervous system learned that protection helped you win. This isn't a character flaw. This is your brain trying to help you by reinforcing patterns that worked. But those same patterns make you seem distant, unavailable, cold, even when you're sitting right there wanting connection. Competence. Anxiety. Successful people develop what psychologists call competence anxiety in others. When you're winning consistently, people around you start feeling inadequate just by proximity. They're not angry at you necessarily. They're uncomfortable with what your success reflects about their own choices. And they manage that discomfort by creating emotional distance first. They stop calling as much. They're less warm. They make little comments about how you've changed. And you feel that withdrawal, and it confirms your growing sense that success means isolation. So you pull back more. They pull back more. And suddenly you're cold, not because you wanted to be, but because coldness became the equilibrium that makes everyone comfortable. You're playing a role that was partly assigned to you by other people's discomfort with their own lives. What you can do. But here's what you can actually do about this, because understanding the mechanism is useless without application. Here are 4 strategies to maintain connection while succeeding. You need to deliberately maintain empathy bridges. This means intentionally keeping experiences in your life that connect you to common struggles. Maybe you still wait in lines instead of optimizing everything. Maybe you still use some regular services instead of premium versions. Maybe you volunteer or mentor in environments where you're exposed to problems you no longer face personally. Practice something called emotional translation. When someone shares a problem, before you respond, ask yourself, what's the feeling underneath this? Not the situation, the feeling. Trapped, scared, overwhelmed, invisible. Then connect to a time you felt that feeling, even if the circumstances were completely different. You need to explicitly communicate that your response style has changed without making it about superiority. You can actually say things like, I notice I go into fixing mode really fast now and I'm working on that. Tell me what would actually be helpful right now. Recognize that connection is now a skill you need to practice, not a gift that just happens. Schedule time for depth with people you love. Ask more questions and offer less advice. Stay curious about experiences you're no longer having. This isn't about pretending you're not successful. It's about giving your brain current, fresh data points for empathy instead of forcing it to rely on old memories. Your mirror neurons need active stimulation to stay functional. Maybe you've never worried about rent, but you've definitely felt trapped. Maybe you've never had a horrible boss, but you felt powerless. Connect to the emotion first, respond from there, then offer practical help if it's wanted. This keeps you emotionally accurate, even when you're circumstantially distant from someone's situation. Or, I used to experience something similar, though my circumstances were different. The feeling you're describing, is it more like anxiety or frustration or something else? You're bridging the gap verbally that used to happen automatically. It feels awkward at first, but it prevents the interpretation that you don't care. You're showing your work, emotionally speaking. The worst part, and here's the thing, nobody tells you about this whole pattern. The coldness isn't the worst part. The worst part is the confusion. You know you're not actually cold. You care deeply. You want connection. But everyone's treating you like you're distant, and eventually you start to believe it. You start to think maybe success really does require emotional sacrifice. Maybe you can't have both achievement and intimacy. But that's not true. What's true is that success changes the automatic nature of connection. It doesn't eliminate the possibility. You just have to become manual about things that used to be automatic. You have to consciously choose warmth, the way you now consciously choose everything else. High performers optimize their time, their health, their productivity. Most forget to optimize their emotional availability and then wonder why success feels so lonely. The successful people who avoid this trap are the ones who understand that connection is now a skill they need to practice, not a gift that just happens. They schedule time for depth with people they love. They ask more questions and offer less advice. They stay curious about experiences they're no longer having. They recognize that their brain's efficiency is trying to help them, but also trying to protect them. And sometimes protection feels like coldness, when what you actually need is presence. Your action step. So here's what I want you to do. Pick one person in your life who's accused you of changing or being distant when you don't feel like you have been. Reach out to them, not to defend yourself, but to understand their experience. Ask them specifically when they felt you were unavailable or cold. Listen for the pattern. Chances are you'll find moments where you were solving when they wanted empathy, where you were efficient when they wanted presence, where you were protected when they wanted vulnerability. Not because you're cold, but because your brain was doing what successful brains do. And now that you understand the mechanism, you can interrupt it. You can choose connection consciously, instead of waiting for it to happen automatically. That's how you keep your humanity while you're building your empire. That's the truth nobody tells you.